I can't put into words how humiliating this is for Trump and terrible on the world stage, but in their latest phone call today that just wrapped up, Trump chatted with Putin again. And in the call, Putin just metaphorically spit in Trump's face because he's learning, Trump's not going to snap at me. He might scream at Zelensky. He might say, I'm mad at Putin. I'm considering sanctions, but he just won't do it. And actually is giving me more of what I want by pulling back on defensive weapons shipments to Ukraine that were promised. And after we go through this latest update, I spoke to, and that'll be part of this segment, Caolan Robertson, who's on the ground in Ukraine, a journalist who's covering all this face-to-face with what's going on, the outcomes of decisions like this. So do stick around for that discussion. It's something you're going to want to hear. But first, the latest Wall Street Journal reports Trump holds first call with Putin after pause in Ukraine weapon shipments. The two leaders' latest conversation comes as the White House has pulled back from efforts to broker peace between Moscow and Ukraine and is actually making peace less likely by giving Putin what he wants. So I'll remind you the context of previous calls would be they'd get on, Putin would be all flattering, he'd probably give the entire history of Russia again, and then for 2 hours they'd talk, and a part of it would be Putin doing the dog and pony show. It was clear in his actions he didn't want peace, but he would say, yeah, Trump, you're so right, you're the great peacemaker, I want peace too, but I'm just being forced into invading this country. And Trump would go, oh my goodness, well this is, well good, and they would both go out and they'd give similar readouts from the call saying, we discussed the need for peace, blah, 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 blah. This time, Putin didn't even do that. He just went, no, I'm going to do what I want. And I know you won't do anything. That last part he didn't say. But Trump urged Putin to quickly end the war in Ukraine. But the Russian president refused outright. Again, unlike past calls, he's not even doing the dog and pony show anymore. The White House has yet to release its own summary. Putin told Trump during the call that Russia won't back down from its goals, despite the U.S. leader's call for a speedy end to the conflict. Everyone says that. At some point, when Trump does everything that makes peace less likely, can we stop going, but he really says he wants peace? Quote, our president said that Russia will achieve its goals. That is, the elimination of the well-known root causes that led to the current state of affairs. Russia will not back down from these goals. This is a huge shift in tone. And this is what happens when you exhibit weakness. And Caolan, who you're about to hear from, told us that this caused the Kremlin to pop the champagne. This was exactly what they wanted. Trump withholding these defensive weapons shipments. This will cost lives and is exhibiting profound weakness on the part of Trump, where now he clearly is seen to be as someone you can push around. So as you listen to this interview with Caolan Robertson, who's been covering Russia's war against Ukraine for about 2.5 years now, been in Ukraine, living there for a year, do go support his work. I'll link it in the description below if you are compelled by what you hear. Caolan, spelled C-A-O-L-A-N, Caolan Robertson, and it's Caolan Reports on YouTube and X. Check those out. Here was my discussion with Caolan. Well, Caolan Robertson, thank you so much for joining us today. If you'll just start with the news that I've told my audience about, but hearing it from you that we got from the Trump Pentagon, and then going into the effect that that's going to have for Ukrainians.
Well, it's going to have a huge effect. Essentially, the Pentagon in the last couple of days has said that they're not going to send the promised packages of air defense systems that literally keep the skies right above me right now clear. This is Patriot American-made air defense systems. They're super effective, and they stop the Russian drones and the Russian ballistic missiles hitting civilian buildings and hitting objects all around here in Kyiv, which happens every single night. And this, it's shocking that it's happening. These aren't kind of weapon systems to fire into Russia. These are defensive systems to keep people safe, to keep people alive. It's going to cost hundreds of lives if these weapons aren't delivered here. And it also undermines America and their weapon systems as well, because if you're in any other country and you're watching this right now and you're buying American weapon systems from the US government, and you see that at any point they can just turn off that tap, they can just stop stocking the batteries that you have here, then they're going to start downing it, and they're going to start looking elsewhere. And Europe are going to start looking at developing their own air defense systems instead, as an alternative to Patriots. But it's really shocking, and it's come out of basically nowhere. this is going to have an immediate effect because there's only a certain amount of patriots in Kyiv right now in this city. And that's being depleted every single day. Like there were drones hovering above. There's one hovering above right now. Actually, there was an air alert over this call. And the Ukrainians are going to have to start deciding how many they've got left and how many they can use each night and how many missiles they let through. And Russia knows this. Russians are celebrating this right now. If you look on Russian Telegram, if you look on VK, if you look at all the Russian social media apps, they're saying this is an amazing thing for America to have done. So the Kremlin love it. They're popping champagne about this. And it makes it much easier for Russia to attack Ukraine. And, this is called escalation by Trump. Giving Ukraine weapons to defend itself is apparently escalation, not threatening to invade Greenland. It's apparently not escalation when Iran gives drones to Russia. Apparently it's not escalation when North Korea, which happened last week, announces 30,000 new troops to come to this country and kill more people. That's not escalation. Russia can get all the help from all of its neighbors as much as it wants. But to defend Ukraine, apparently that's an escalation. So it's really shocking and just came out of nowhere. I mean, I was genuinely surprised by this as well, because again, these aren't weapon systems to fire at Russia. These are to keep the skies safe, literally these skies right now.
Yeah, we covered, I think it was the State Department spokeswoman, Tammy Bruce, trying to justify this decision. And the reporter asked essentially what you're laying out, which is, wait, I thought Trump kept repeating essentially the reason why he can't be more pro-Ukraine is because all he wants is to stop the killing. He just wants to stop the killing. But this is necessarily a step that will exacerbate the killing. And Tammy Bruce's response was just to kind of say a bunch of words that made absolutely no sense. So even they haven't really, clearly they're insecure and disoriented about what their justification is going to be. From your estimation, I know this would be speculative, but where do you think it came from? Why do you think the Trump administration made the decision?
I think Trump is bored. I think Trump is bored of the Ukraine-Russia war. I think he genuinely thought that he could stop it in 2 days. That was his campaign promise. I reckon he literally got into office, called up Putin and said, hey, can you just stop the whole invasion thing? Can you just give it up for a few minutes? I made some promises to my voters and I said I'd make it stop. Can you just stop? And Putin would have said, no, I'm not going to stop until I've taken all of Ukraine, which probably really upset Trump because him and Putin go back a long time. They're besties from the 90s. And he basically has decided to side with Putin and to say, all right, I want nothing to do with this. I'm not going to help Ukraine anymore. I'm not going to help defend Ukraine anymore, because if Ukraine falls, then at least my side would. I mean, that's basically what's happening. He's bored of defending Ukraine. He's realized now that this is more complicated than a sales pitch or a sales deal. A war is not like, buying real estate or selling real estate, the kind of type of business strategy that he's applied to this. It's complicated. And then so he went to Zelensky and he said, all right, these are the terms that Putin wants. He wants to completely take and invade and genocide your country. Please give it to him and please let it happen. He's my best friend and I made promises. Please let him do it. And Zelensky's obviously said, no, this is a sovereign nation and we're not going to allow our people to be genocided, wiped off the earth, and for all the land that's been stolen to be kept. And so Trump is fed up. He's annoyed. He doesn't want to help Ukraine anymore. He wants nothing to do with it. He's bored. He's genuinely bored of it. And that's why he's pulling back. That's why he's lifting sanctions on Russia. He wants to just pretend that none of this matters. And he genuinely likes Putin. I mean, there was the interview with Steve Witkoff saying that,
I liked him.
Painted him a beautiful painting of Donald Trump. It was just stunning. And that just warmed Trump's heart so much. And I think he genuinely thinks that Putin's his friend, and he has his interests at heart. He doesn't care about Ukraine. That's why he's got no interest in visiting this city. Biden visited this city. Every president, prime minister have basically visited. He wants nothing to do with it. And he's washing his hands of it. And that's basically what's happened. Yeah,
there's that clip of Tucker Carlson asking Witkoff, well, what did you think of Putin when you met with him? And Witkoff doesn't mention any of the consequences of this situation, just goes, I liked him. He was nice. Which to me comes off not only so immoral, but so childlike that, but he took me into a big building and he shook my hand. It was so sweet. And he had a painting of Trump. He said he was really worried. He prayed, Caolan, for Trump whenever there was the assassination attempt. It's disturbing. And to your point, Trump is having this rage that he wasn't able to, as everyone warned him of, just quote unquote settle Russia's invasion in 24 hours. At one point, he even said in 24 hours of him getting elected. But because I guess to your point of his fondness for Putin, he refuses to direct that rage at Putin and is actually pulling back on the economic measures. You mentioned this on Russia, which would make us even further from some sort of peace.
Some kind of air defense stuff now, because they're now shooting these drones out of the sky rather than using Patriots. So that's why you can hear that kind of loud popping noises. Because they would have used Patriots. Now they can't because they're being depleted. They've got to reserve them. So there's an immediate effect to this that you can actually hear. Yeah.
So I wanted to bring up one of the things that you do that I don't see a ton of people do is you put you obviously cover the carnage and the most important parts of this, which is the human toll and the authoritarian attempt to take over a different country. But something that you also put emphasis on is, despite all of that, you'll play videos of people dancing and joyful moments, speaking to the courage and resilience of Ukrainians. It's been a year since you've been living in Ukraine. What has impacted you most about that? Just seeing how everyday Ukrainians are dealing with the day-to-day, even as we're doing this interview, sirens going off. What has impacted you about that?
Well, it's very noisy. I think the actual speakers are right here in Maida. I think the first time I saw this was when I went to a frontline city, and it was being shelled constantly. It was called Chasiv Yar. It's now basically under Russian occupation. And I saw a building that had just been blown out, and there were some of the elderly residents running out and cleaning up glass while there were still explosions going on. Sometimes there were street cleaners in Kherson that I would see wearing flak jackets, still sweeping up leaves and keeping the city clean, because Ukrainians have this, and this is what I try to capture, but it's really hard to describe unless you really see it as well, a genuine pride for their country and just a pride for everything they do. Even if you get on the train here, each carriage, wherever you go, has its own conductor almost, who knocks on the door and wakes you up, gives you fresh bedding, and they all have pride in their own carriages and the own numbers of each train. And there's just this feeling everywhere, all over the country, where people just love this country. And I think what Russia's done and what Russia's trying to do is to break that spirit, because in the Soviet mentality, if you bomb people and you scare people, like Russia's a mafia state, it sometimes terrifies people into submission. But what he's trying to do in Ukraine is that, and it's having the opposite effect. It's making people more patriotic. It's making people love their country more and celebrate life every single day. A lot of people here don't know if they're going to wake up in the morning. There are drone attacks every single night. So they wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I went for a run this morning and saw people holding hands, giving each other flowers, passing Kiev cake, playing piano music as soon as curfew opens up, because there's just a feeling of celebrating life. And it's beautiful. The first time I arrived in Ukraine was Valentine's Day 2.5 years ago, just a year since the full-scale invasion. And I got off the train and I was like, how is this Ukraine? I'd never been to Ukraine, but I was shocked. There was flower sellers in front of sandbags. And I started interviewing people and saying, why is it important to still celebrate love? And they said, because love is victory. And what else do you have in life? And it was beautiful, and you see it all the time. There's more flowers sold on the streets in this city than any other city I've lived in. People just are in love because they're celebrating every single day that they're still here and that their country is still here. And that's why they've managed to hold off Russia for 2.5 years, for 3 years, because Russia, one of the most feared giant armies in the world, defeated or held off by a country that's actually passionate, a country that actually believes in something. You can really feel it here. People here believe in something. And on the Russian side, they don't know what they're fighting for. They're pulled out of prisons and given, $2,500 a month to kill people, basically. And Ukraine, people sign up and volunteer, and a lot of people fight for free because they love their home. And they love coming home to their wives and partners. You see it at the train station, 5 minutes at Kyiv train station, and you just see soldiers coming back from the weekends at the front, just with holding flowers, hugging, going for dates and dinner and sitting watching the sunset. And it's beautiful, but it's why Ukraine has survived for so long. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's incredible. Okay, a question that comes up a lot, and I argue with it a ton, but I'm curious to hear your articulation of it from the American right wing is, whatever is laid out as to the importance of this for Ukraine, their question is, how is it important, or why should it be important to Americans? Some of them ask that question in a much more vitriolic, aggressive way. But from your experience Why should this matter to Americans specifically?
Ukraine is the biggest country in Europe by size, and this country is one of America's closest allies, and this country is so patriotic to America. Here is where the Maidan Revolution happened in 2014, and this country looked west to freedom and to democracy, and they looked to the US as the beacon of that. Everybody here would agree with that, everyone at that protest, and so many Ukrainians love what the United States stands for. So the United States, even strategically, has one of the best allies with resources, with minerals, and with passionate people. And to lose that would be to lose your standing on the world stage, to step down slightly. It's also humiliating for the United States to lose a country in the West, the largest country in Europe, to basically a rival, to a dictatorship like Russia, to a communist dictatorship, which is the opposite of everything that America stands for. And it makes America look weak if Ukraine loses. And everyone is watching this right now. China's watching this, and they're looking at Taiwan. The reason there's more destabilization in the world right now is because Putin has been able to do whatever the hell he wants here, and it looks like Trump doesn't care and isn't going to stop him. And so even strategically, this makes America look weak. A country that is in the West, America's also in the West, a country that supported Ukraine from the beginning. For that country to fall makes America look completely weak and makes other dictators around the world think they can do whatever they want. And that's extremely dangerous. It's also democratic and freedom-loving values are rare on Earth. Most of this planet is governed by dictatorships, and they aren't democracies, and freedom of speech doesn't really exist. This country is that. I sat in front of the president just a couple of weeks ago as an independent journalist and asked anything I wanted because freedom of speech exists here. That's rare on Earth. And to have a country, an ally as well, fall that holds those values is a loss morally around the world. And if you voted for Trump and you believe in those values, you should believe in Ukraine, because Ukraine loves America and loves Americans. It's so patriotic to the US. And arming Ukraine isn't costing you money, tax dollars. It's almost costing you nothing. It's actually creating jobs in the US. The money that's spent on Ukraine is basically spent manufacturing new weapons all across the south of America and giving Ukraine your old weapons. So it's also bolstering America's military support. So it's good for American workers, it's good for the American economy, and it's supporting genuinely freedom-loving values. And you feel that here.
Yeah. Whenever conversations come up, like during Trump's whole temper tantrum at Zelensky in the Oval Office, or Trump, I think today, just had a call with Putin, and the discussions about a peace deal come up. We got to get a peace deal. Often, a lot of the Americans I talk to aren't really, especially supporters of Trump, aren't really concerned with the particulars. They just want on paper for it to be settled so that they can say, see, Trump settled it. When you're talking to Ukrainians and those stories are in the news, like, it seems we're so far from that at this point in time. Putin's made it so abundantly clear that this was never about the things he proclaimed, because Trump would give all those to him, and he just wants to continue invading. But when at times anchors are making it seem like we're really close to maybe they're going to agree to some sort of peace deal, what is the mindset of Ukrainians about what they'd be willing to concede, if anything, and what a fair peace deal would look like?
Well, Ukrainians, and I speak to Ukrainians every day, know that Russia doesn't want peace. Russia has never wanted peace. The USSR and Soviet Union colonized this country for nearly 100 years. They made the Ukrainian language illegal. They banned Ukrainian recipes. They banned Ukrainian music, art, and culture, and tried to basically wipe out and cleanse the culture in this country. So generationally, Ukrainians know what Russia is, and Russia hasn't changed since the collapse of the Soviet Union. Russia stole Crimea and parts of Ukraine in 2014. That's when the invasion actually started. And then they saw what they tried to do in Kyiv. They tried to come here, do a victory parade behind me, and kill Zelensky. And they know exactly what Russia wants. And Russia wants the whole of Ukraine. And whenever Putin says he wants peace, all he means is we want America and everyone to stop helping Ukraine and to stall things while they continue hammering this country, or so that Russia can reamass their armies and continue taking Ukraine. Ukrainians know their neighbors. They know their insane neighbors very, very well. More than I didn't really understand the Russian problem until I really, really got here and actually saw what was going on. But every single time Putin says, I want to do a peace conference, the media should completely ignore it. And putting out headlines using the word Putin and peace is basically repeating Kremlin propaganda at this point. It's putting out Kremlin press releases, something like Tim Pool would do. So it's just like, it's nonsense. Putin is completely uninterested in peace. If you look at his latest peace terms, it's Ukraine can't have an army. Ukraine has to give up all the territory, including other oblasts, which would condemn every single person, all of the millions of Ukrainians who live in those areas, to ethnic cleansing, to genocide, like we saw in Mariupol, and would basically allow Russia time to reamass its army and come straight back here to Kyiv. Ukrainians know what's going on. They know exactly what Russia wants to do. It's not even Ukraine. They want to take Estonia. There are anti-tank trenches being built today, starting a few days ago, in Estonia on the border to Russia, because the rest of the countries in this region know what the threat is as well. Putin said 2 weeks ago that he believes every square inch, every square foot of soil that a Russian soldier or a Soviet soldier set foot on belongs to Russia. That includes half of Germany, and that includes Poland, and that includes a huge part of Europe. And he's legit about that. Look at his interview with Tucker Carlson, where Tucker thought he was going to be, super cool and based and talk about how awful LGBT people are. And all he did was sit and talk about bringing back the glory days of the sort of historical parts of the USSR.
Yes,
sort of
sure, but Tucker saw a really nice grocery store, I'll have you know.
He did. And they don't have grocery stores here in Ukraine, actually. So
there was an escalator in a grocery store.
There was. Well, speaking of grocery stores as well, he's quite quiet now because there are videos of Russians on Sunday filming in their grocery stores because they're experiencing hyperinflation right now because their economy is finished, selling one piece of bread that's been cut in half and then put plastic around it and charged 22 rubles because they're literally experiencing an economic crisis. That's actually what's going on in the stores in Russia. But he found the one store that's like that Putin uses, like the one fancy store.
Yeah.
And was like,
and
oh my God,
still wasn't even that nice.
That was shocking.
So I just have so many questions for you. You just let me know if you need to go at any point. I'll try to move efficiently. What do you think? I've heard different suggestions from thinkers on this subject as to what brings this to an end, and I've gone through kind of my thought on that. What do you think ultimately does bring lasting peace?
If Russia basically has to concede and collapses, maybe like it did in 1991. I mean, we're all terrified of this. I mean, nothing bad happened when the Soviet Union fell. Nothing bad happened at all. And Russia, in its ambitions, and Russia is historically like this, the Soviet mentality has been like this for centuries, is aggressive expansionism and colonialism through all of its neighbors and its borders. And until Russia can no longer do that, then it's going to continue its ambitions. With or without Putin, it's just going to carry on. There's a long line of people after Putin. And that looks like economic collapse right now. If Russia was to fall, and if this war was to stop, it would be through financial means. Sanctions are the only ways to make it work. Russia only exports two things, terrorism and gas. And the money that it's paying the soldiers right now, $50,000 a year to kill people in this country, are paid by Russian gas. And Europe buys a lot of Russian gas. The EU actually spends more money buying Russian gas than it does on aid to Ukraine still. And until those sanctions really, really take place, then Russia, if those sanctions take place, and NATO have said that they want to step this up as well, then Russia would go bankrupt. Their economy is smaller than Italy's. It's 2 trillion GDP. It's not that big. And they're already experiencing massive credit card defaults. They're already experiencing 13 of some of its biggest companies collapsing this month. This is now in the newspapers in Russia. If you open the Moscow newspapers, they're now admitting that hard times are ahead. And in Russia, the mentality is basically everything is fine until the very, very last second. It's keeping up appearances. And the fact that Putin is now coming out and saying hard times are ahead, and the newspapers are saying there's going to be an economic crisis, shows it's really bad. If that continues and Russia collapses financially and goes through a deep, deep recession, that's the only way this will stop, is to hit them where it hurts, and that's the bank account. America can do this. Europe can do this. It's possible. It just needs to happen right now. There is no other solution. Putin isn't going to just decide, you know what, I'm bored of this now. I made a mistake. You can take it all back. I don't want Zaporizhzhia anymore anyway. I didn't even like it. That's not going to happen. They want this entire country, and they feel entitled to this whole country. Not just Putin, but the majority of Russians. And until they can no longer afford this fight, until we're no longer going to pay for this fight, then it's going to continue. That's it. The next thing that is going to happen, though, is Ukraine have basically been holding off their long-range attacks inside Russia. They've been hitting oil refineries, drone manufacturing warehouses, and they did that Operation Spiderweb, if you remember, where they blew up all those planes, amazing. Trump was very upset about that, right? Because Putin doesn't like it. It's like upset his best friend. So he was like, "Can you please stop hitting Russia where it hurts? This is really upsetting. I'm going to have to call Putin and explain. I'm so sorry about this." So Ukraine has basically stopped doing that temporarily while these new talks take place. And now that this shipment isn't coming here, the air defense systems, the weapon systems that are promised, Ukraine are going to start striking Russia again, where it hurts, as they should. And that could also cripple Russia financially because they're hitting oil refineries. This is where oil is stored. And Ukraine are basically like, we're going to have to do this ourselves. If the United States aren't going to go through with what they promised, if Trump isn't going to go through what he promised or help us, we're going to make our own missiles and we're going to hit Russia ourselves. So that's probably the next bit. And air defense systems are pretty short range. Like a Patriot system goes like between 80 and 100 kilometers. It's not very far. And the air defense systems in Russia, it's a big country, are spread out all over the place. Putin has a few of them around his private residences to keep them safe, because obviously that's the priority. And they have a few in Moscow and a few in Kursk. But it's very, very, very hard to provide full cover air defense over an entire country like Russia. So when Ukraine launches stuff, it works pretty successfully. And that is what I think is going to happen more. It's what should happen. Obviously, Putin isn't going to like that. Trump isn't going to like that. But it'll be pretty effective. So we'll be seeing that in the next few weeks, which is good.
Yeah, I don't want to turn this into just me ranting about my right-wing counterparts in this space, but you referenced, Tim, pull the American right-wing response to any time, and this is Trump's obviously too, like you mentioned, anytime Ukraine goes on the offense is to say they're escalating and trying to pull us into World War III. And yeah, I genuinely don't even comprehend in the mindset of some of these folks what they imagine Ukraine's supposed to do. Just sit there forever. They're never supposed to go in the office, never supposed to try to cripple Russia. It's mind-boggling. What do you see as when you're talking to Ukrainians, and well, to contextualize it, in the United States, as you know, you'll have people who aren't for Trump, who see him as betraying so many of our values and as giving up on our allies and alienating us on the world stage. But if you like Trump, then you see everything he's doing as utter strength and standing up for America and all this different stuff. When speaking to Ukrainians, how do they describe this recent news with him pulling back on support for Ukraine, or the broader alignment with him ideologically with Putin, or the election when he even came into office with the fear that that's how he was going to stand on the world stage? What's the conversation about Trump as it pertains to the American values that you mentioned they usually love?
Well, Ukrainians separate Americans from Trump at this point, because the Americans that have been coming here and volunteering and helping, who are endless, there's probably some in the streets behind me right now, have been incredible for Ukraine. There have been philanthropists, volunteers, soldiers, fighters, Americans flocked to come and help here, everyday civilians. And Ukrainians saw that and see that. And they separate that from Trump. And they also see that the majority of America still loves democracy and freedom and good values. And I don't think they see Trump as really representing a lot of them. I think they were shocked. When Trump first was elected, the feeling here was actually not despair. It was, okay, well, he said he would get this over with in 2 days. Let's see how it happens. And I still think that because America is still seen as such a democratic, freedom-loving sort of capitalist society, that even Trump would never side with a communist dictatorship. It seemed kind of unfathomable. And when this started to happen, and when Zelensky was bullied in the White House, I think that was when Ukrainians were really, 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 really horrified. But it's all directed against the government. The rhetoric is never Americans, it's Trump and Trump's administration. Because Trump's administration has been infiltrated by pro-Kremlin stooges like Tulsi Gabbard. And I think the anger is directed towards that, and how Russia has poisoned the political system in America and the media system. Don't forget, $100 million for Tenet Media to have right-wing personalities put this kind of stuff out. And now Tim Pool is in the White House asking Trump questions. This is how the poison spreads within the system. And I think Ukrainians can see how that works, because Ukrainians also have seen how Russia infiltrates with its tentacles every corner of society. They did this with Yanukovych. They did this during Maidan. It's all about subversion. It's all about putting dirty Russian money into politics, supporting their own candidates. The Russians have been trying to do that here for decades. And they see the same thing happening in America as what Russia tried to do here, as what Russia tried to do in Georgia, what Russia tried to do in Moldova, which is put their plans and put their poison into the systems. I think they were just shocked how easily these people were bought, how easily Dave Rubin and these people were bought, and how easily genuinely important people like Steve Witkoff were convinced by KGB propaganda. That painting that was made is classic KGB propaganda. It's flattery. Flattery is one of the tenets of Soviet KGB propaganda. Is flattery. It's also having compromat on politicians, and I think that's literally just what's happened in the White House. Is you have these plants that have been put in, and it's everywhere. Look, there was a video, a post that came out a few days ago from a big American aerospace engineer, and he said, "Oh, I got an email from a guy called Ivan. He's a Russian student, and he was asking if he could have an internship with me, and asking if I could have like $1 million to help build a drone jet propulsion system." So I thought it was great. I love ambitious young kids, so I gave it to him, and we gave him all this technology. And this kid is like photographed with Russian high society in dodgy St. Petersburg schools. Clearly a Russian spy. Also, they're not even hiding it anymore. They actually called him Ivan, which is like the meme. So like they didn't even, that's how on the nose it is now. They're like, should we just literally call him Ivan? No one's going to question this. But it's everywhere in the US. It's kind of every corner of society. And it's because the current government doesn't take the Russian threat seriously. Russia's at war with America through propaganda. They're polluting American society by funding the far left and the far right, extremist groups, things like Charlottesville, and they're doing it to disrupt and destroy and decay people's news feeds and have people not trust elections in America, to destabilize American society. And it's been working. And America didn't realize that that's a form of warfare. You know, they send missiles here, but they send propaganda to you guys. So it's a different type of war, but it's still a war.
Yeah. Well, last question. Thank you so much for your time. What would you say from your observation of American mainstream media? One thing that I think I've seen you reference, but that I've been noticing, is it's so easy the way that news cycles work to just kind of move on and forget. And I don't know, we're kind of bored with that topic. And so let me know if you see that as well, kind of American mainstream media moving away from Ukraine, even as a topic. And then from all the media discussions as we're doing, a new Putin call with Trump, and the Oval Office meeting in Ukraine. What do you see missed in that conversation?
About which particular thing? So
just as you observe American media's coverage of Ukraine and Russia's invasion, what part of the discussion, because it becomes just a news cycle, right? What part do you feel like is missed? What would you like Americans to know?
I think it's what we discussed earlier, what Ukraine is. You know, I think what's discussed every single time here is just the explosions that happen, the missiles that go off. Whenever there's a major attack on Ukraine, the mainstream media in the US, across the board, including CNN, say that it's usually retaliation, say that there's two sides to this. And the media across the board basically talk about Ukraine and talk about Russia as if this country is also a perpetrator, as if it's two countries bickering. Mm-hmm. And the most important thing that should always be mentioned and always be reminded is that Russia has been the aggressor, and that any time Russia launches an attack on Ukraine, it's an attack on an independent sovereign country that did nothing to deserve this invasion. And it's not retaliation for anything. I think that's a really important part of the rhetoric, is remembering that Ukraine was innocent the entire time in this. I know there was lots of propaganda put out about, biolabs and Zelensky not putting out, Zelensky is awful because he's the first president in human history to not hold elections during a war. Apparently that's, so he's awful. So Ukraine deserves to be shut down. There isn't two sides to this. There's one side to this. There's Russia that decided to genocide and invade the largest country in Europe, and there's a country that didn't deserve it and just wants its independence and just wants to be left alone. Just to be reminded of that is really, really important. So
important. Even just subtle things like I see it described constantly as the Ukraine war. It's like there's no mention. The Ukraine war is just subtle things can really distort people's perception. Caolan, thank you so much for your time. Keep it up.
Thank you so much. No, this has been a really cool conversation. Thanks.